Thank you for tuning into our podcast. We are coming to you from South Hadley, Massachusetts. I am your host, Carrie, and joining me is Holyoke's very own local historian and creator of the Historical Tours of Greater Holyoke, Robert Cohn, in which he offers both public and private tours, as well as presentations of local canal systems, reservoirs, cemeteries, and churches, as well as various parks and streets in Holyoke, South Hadley, and Chicopee, Massachusetts. Now, you actually lead these tours and give these presentations yourself, is that correct?
Yes, and this is one of my favorite places to go inside this beautiful park.
That's awesome. And so today you're going to be telling us about that, right? That's the Riverside Park of South Hadley. Now, tell us about the first park in this series of 3 parks. The Lower Riverside Park?
Yes, so the Lower Riverside Park you can get into off of the South Hadley town parking lot. And when you go in there, you're going to see 2 important things. One is you're going to see the lock system towards your right. And so you're going to be able to go up on a elevated platform and look down, and you're going to be able to see 3 of the areas where the first 3 locks were, the lowest to the second to the third. The 4th and 5th level have been destroyed, so they're not visible anymore. But you can at least see the area where locks were. Remember, this is the first canal for navigation in the United States, and to see these locks still there, the locks were put in 1803, the canal put in 1795. So the locks are now 220 years old, and the sight of them is incredible. Now, also in Lower Riverside Park, if you go down, zigzag down to where the river is, you're going to find a place where there used to be a predecessor set of 9 small mills with an industrial canal, power canal, right behind it. So South Hadley had 2 canals going, and some of them at the same time. So it had a navigational canal. It also had a Bardwell industrial canal. And this fed these 9 small mills. But those mills were taken down. There might have been a fire in 1846, but anyways, they were all taken down by 1848. And in place of that was put up the Glasgow Mill. The Glasgow Mill made gingham. Gingham is patterned cotton that you put in most popularly into towels. So when you have 2 different colored patterned cotton, that's gingham. And South Hadley was one of the biggest makers of that in the world. And that mill lasted for 48 years up to 1896 before it lost profitability. 1895 was the second biggest depression in the United States. And so a lot of mills had trouble during those years. So for a few years, this mill lied dormant. And it wasn't until 1903 that a mill called the Hadley Mill, which was owned by an institutional mill in Holyoke, they opened up. And from 1903 to 1930, the Hadley Mill made paper there, which is good because those former 9 little mills that were there in the pre-1848 era, 2 of them were slightly bigger than those other tiny mills, and they made paper. The first mechanized machines to make paper were made in South Hadley. And so Holyoke might be paper city, but South Hadley is the paper town. Now, inside this Lower Riverside Park, you can also walk, if you want to, down to the area where people fish below the Vietnam Bridge. So that's it.
So now there is also the Texon Park. Now explain that park.
Okay, that location had historically 2 mills. One came long before the other. That was the Crew Paper Mill. From 1848 to 1948, it lasted 100 years, and it was right at the river's edge and right next to the dam. It was built in 1848 because they knew the big wooden dam was coming in that year, and so they wanted to use the South Hadley Navigational Canal as both a navigational canal and as a power canal, and they did. And the main beneficiary of that was the Crewe paper mill. Now, both the glass show and the Crewe had worker housing, and you can find those on the streets around the area, such as Main Street, Canal Street, High Street, Cottage Street, Carew Street. They all had industrial mill-owned housing for its workers. Now, Texon lasted for 100 years, but in 1948, Carew lasted for 100 years, but in 1948, Texon Mill came in, and they made artificial rubber products, such as parts of shoes, especially the soles, and artificial leather products. So they made a lot of parts that you might find in shoes. Now, they lasted up to 1986, so they only lasted 28 years. And also inside that park, in the year 1866, you got a third mill. So not the Glasgow, not the Crewe, but the Hampshire paper mill. And that was able to come in that year because the South Hadley Navigational Canal stopped navigation in 1863, and it kept being used as power. And so since you had to open up all the lock systems, you could fit right below the two largest locks another paper mill. And they put in the Hampshire paper mill. And it lasted from 1866 to 1935 there. In 1940, for 5 years it was dormant, but in 1940 the Stevens paper mill was put in, and they lasted into the 1980s. So it's been a very heavily used area, both for navigation, for power, and you get to, on some of my tours, you get to hear about this, but on your own, you can go in there and experience it as a beautiful park.
Now, so quickly before we continue with the rest of the interview, just to fill our listeners in, if you want to find out more information or want to sign up for any of his various tours, you can check out his site at holyokecanaltour.org. There he has both videos of the various stops along each tour and also past and present photos of the historical sites throughout as well. If you are interested in setting up a private tour, you can email him directly at bobcat4214, @yahoo.com. Again, that's BOBCAT4214, @yahoo.com. They are perfect for fun and educational outdoor activities for the whole family, or for your group parties, especially those special occasions and get-togethers. And they're also good just to get outdoors for the day. So getting back to our interview, lastly, there is a gatehouse park. This is a quaint park. Tell us about this one.
All right, we're in the South Hadley Library at this point, and it's easy to see that Gatehouse Park. Just go to the second floor and look downwards, and you'll see the Gatehouse Park. They made it into a park with benches, for instance, so you can walk around with flowers. Now, most time it's locked up, unless you're in a special group and you apply to have it opened up. But that can only happen daylight from Monday to Friday. Now, the Gatehouse Park was first made in 1848, and then it was, in the beginning there, because the navigation had to be separated from the power operations. Then in 1940, they put up a larger wall above the wall or the apron that was already there. That was because in the 1930s, there was two horrible floods, and the Corps of Engineers came in and designed a flood system, and that included making the apron much larger. Now, also in that Gatehouse Park, there's two gatehouses, and that's where it gets its name. And the gatehouses were made in 1848. One was for the water of the navigational canal, and one was for the water of the power system, the power canal. And you couldn't have both at the same time, so when there was a boat coming through, you close off the power one, and when there was no boat, you can open up the power one and let water through. Now, those two in 1940 were changed slightly. They had to be raised up, so both gatehouses were raised in elevation, and some were put below it, and then some concrete walls put below it. And that was because they had to prevent floods from coming in there. And it works, and they're still there. So these houses are incredibly old, and they're still in great shape because the owners, Holyoke Gas and Electric or Holyoke Water Power through the years, have put a lot into trying to make stable. They're not functional because they don't have to be.
So how should this park be connected to other historical sites in both South Hadley and Holyoke?
Yes, there's walking trails made with a beautiful map of 4 walking trails. One follows the route of the Sahi Navigational Canal. Another follows the route of homes that are put on North Main Street and High Street. Another walk follows that from the Southern Library over the Vietnam Veterans Bridge, into Holyoke to the canals, and also up to the fish elevator. So that's one thing that's been done. I think another thing should be done, and that is you should make a bike lane along the route of the former South Hadley Navigational Canal. There should be one out on the sidewalk, and when the sidewalk ends, there should be one on the edge of the road. And upper parts of the Sahi Navigational Canal should also have not just one on the road, a bike lane, but a bike path put on both sides of the dirt of both sides of the canal. And that can only be done on the upper parts of it for about 1.25 miles. The Sahi Navigational Canal is 2.5 miles long, but only the upper half of that canal is now in place and invisible to people. So it would be great if somehow we get bikes in. And that would be similar to on the Connecticut River. There were 6 navigational canals. The upper 2 were very small, but the lower 4 were big. And 3 of the 4 lower navigational canals have now on them bike paths and bike lanes, except for South Hadley. So I think it's a bit of a disgrace that the first does not have one.
No, thank you, Robert, for educating us on your tours, and we want to thank our listeners for tuning in. You can also tune into a large selection of our other podcasts and much more at his website at holyokecanaltour.org. And again, you can email him directly for private tours or to inquire about anything else at bobcat4214, capital B, at yahoo.com. And be sure to keep an eye out for his upcoming 2024 season tours and more as they become available. Thank you for tuning in.